Hello and welcome to Fame Under Fire with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. This week, Molly-Mae has been getting some heat for how much of her daughter Bambi's life she is choosing to share in her latest Prime Video series, Behind It All. Now, warning, there might be some strong language in this episode. I'm not quite sure yet. Now, we've decided not to show you the clips of Bambi because she's not our kid, but in the first one, Molly-Mae is trying to persuade a reluctant toddler to use the toilet, and in another one, Bambi does a poo in the bath. Now, Molly is not the first influencer to include her child in content, and for sure she will not be the last. But people are questioning how Bambi can consent to this much of her life being out there, as she's only very little. Now, I'm wondering if Bambi is drawing in viewers like she's drawing in me and creating viral moments like her premeditated biting incident. Should she be salaried or have a portion of the profit put away, seeing as the clips are being monetized? Joining me to go through this all is Claire Bessant, Associate Professor at Northumbria University Law School, and our resident trial attorney, Shaun Kent. Shaun, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you're not actually sure who Molly-Mae is. You correct me if you're wrong.
I just heard about Molly-Mae for the first time hearing those clips just now, and okay.
Okay, well, I don't think that I'm being, hyperbolic to say that for a section of British society, the title of the People's Princess passed straight from Diana to Molly-Mae. She really has such a huge dedicated fan base. She started on a show called Love Island, and she had this romance with Tommy Fury, who's in Tyson Fury's family. And then she's just had this huge social media presence. And a lot of what she does is share personal content that now shows the real side of parenting. And I know a lot of mums in particular are saying it's really nice to see that Bambi's done a shit in the bath. This is not glamorous. This is the reality of what it's like. But that's who she is in the internet space. Claire, this phenomena isn't going anyway, and she didn't originate it. But I'm just wondering, do we actually have any laws around sharenting, parenting content online?
Depending on what country you're in, the answer is going to be completely different. So in England, we don't have any specific laws that govern sharenting. We have laws on privacy, we have laws on data protection, but none of them are particularly well adapted to the sharenting context, because obviously you're not going to use privacy laws if you're a child against your parents. If you're a child, how would you actually do that anyway? You're 2 years old, so that doesn't really work very well. People have talked about maybe using the data protection regulation as a way for children to take down information that's put up about them. It certainly is something that can be used by children who've had their information shared on a commercial basis. But actually for most children whose parents are putting their information up online just because they want to share it with family, with friends, they're proud of their children, the data protection regulation doesn't work because there's an exemption that says if you're sharing information for household or personal reasons, the data protection regulation doesn't apply.
Shaun, is that similar in the US or is there more protection?
There are much more protections in the U.S., specifically monetizing, because what we try to do is try to make sure that a parent is not taking advantage of a child. Ours started out, we have what are called Coogan's Law. It started out with a child actor by the name of Jackie Coogan in the 30s. If you're not familiar, Jackie Coogan was in silent films with a guy named Charlie Chaplin. He was in this movie called The Kid. He made a bunch of money from there. For people who aren't familiar with that, he actually went further, became Festus in the Addams Family. So if you watch the Wednesday Addams show, he later became Festus, the bald guy. Well, he gets 21 years old. When he becomes 21 years old, he goes to look for all the money that he made when he was a child, and shockingly, his money was gone. His father had died. His mother had remarried. Her stepfather and his mother took all of his money, so he sued. So as a result, Hollywood put into play the Coogan's Law. What Coogan's Law said is, if you are hiring a child actor, you must, people who are paying these child actors, put 15% of whatever you pay them inside of a trust account, and that trust account goes to the child when they become 18. That's what it was. Well, then what ends up happening is we start getting all these sharenting laws, and everyone's just like, well, this doesn't necessarily protect the child, so what are we going to do? So states like Utah, Illinois, California started passing these new laws. And what the new laws said is, since we have a new class of influencers and we're trying to protect these children, how do we do it? What they decided was a simple formula, which is kind of weird. They said, look, Mom, Dad, if you're putting your kid in any of these videos and they're in at least 30% of the video, you must give the kid 65% of the money you make. Here's the best way to make it make sense. Anoushka, if you have a child and all of a sudden you are a YouTube celebrity and some jeans company comes to you and says, we want you to make us a jeans commercial. And Anoushka says, great. And you're making this 1-minute commercial. And then all of a sudden you say, well, I'm going to put my daughter in it for 50% of the commercial. Well, they say, we're going to pay you $20,000. So you take the $20,000. They said you put your daughter in half of the commercial. That's $10,000. You must give her 65% of that $10,000. You must put $6,500 in a trust account. That's a very long-winded answer, but that's the protection that we have towards the children now. Man, that was a long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
No, but quick maths. That's very impressive.
Yeah. That math did work, actually. Yes, that's literally how the math works.
I'm doing this job for a reason, honey. But that's really interesting to hear that those rules have come about so quickly, because I said this isn't a new phenomena, but it's relatively new in the landscape of media that's been out there. Claire, you've seen the clips. I mean, you heard some of them there. You've seen the doc. Do you actually think, that this uproar around Molly's doc is warranted?
What struck me yesterday when I first got contact to talk about this was actually I was oblivious to this at all. But there were so many things online about what Molly-Mae had done. And I thought, there might have been a small proportion of people who'd watched the clip, but there's now a huge amount more people that are going to be watching it because of all the media furore afterwards commenting on Molly-Mae. And I thought that in itself is really interesting, because we might be saying we don't like it. Well, some people, certainly we've heard this morning, say we don't like what Molly-Mae's doing, but actually they've almost exacerbated the harms to the child's dignity and privacy, because it's become a much bigger issue. That was my initial thought when I sort of went into it. In terms of the video itself, I don't think I would feel comfortable if someone did something like that to me. And I suppose that's one of the questions that parents maybe need to ask themselves is, how would I feel if I was in that situation? And I think it can be very difficult if you're a parent. And obviously the situation that Molly-Mae was in when her daughter was in the bath was one she was not expecting. The camera was already rolling. So that was a very difficult situation for her, how to deal with it. But I think for anyone who's sharenting, it's a question of just thinking sensitively about how would I feel if I was in that situation. Not saying that there is any right or wrong approach that parents should take, and I think everyone is going to have a different view about what is appropriate, but just maybe thinking before information is shared about how would we feel.
Shaun, do you agree?
Absolutely. There's studies, there's studies replete on how children develop, and we always talk about the rules of 7. 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21. Children develop in these different ages and different ranges. And I'm petrified that the things that you might be doing to your child that you think are funny for you and your friends from 0 to 7, how they're going to negatively affect that child down the road, we just don't know. And so a parent might think it's cute now, but we don't know the scars that this child are going to develop.
And look, Molly's come off and said herself, she's going to be raised in this environment. We have this type of humor. She's probably going to find it pretty funny. We invited Molly-Mae to respond to the criticisms and come on and talk to us. We've not heard back yet, but previously she told the Sun newspaper, she's just a child, as in she, Bambi, and I have to manage it carefully. When Bambi gets older, she's going to have a really special video diary. Not all of it's pretty, but it's just magical that I'm able to do that. Asked how her daughter might react to what's being termed Poogate, she said, I think she'll love it. To be honest with you, like I said before, it's quite hard to navigate because she obviously didn't choose this life, but equally, I think we are so grateful to have the life that we do, and I think it's me and Tommy, Tommy's the dad, Bambi's dad, just navigating our way through it and figuring out how it feels right for Bambi. My question is, I'll come to you first, Shaun, seeing as the laws are a little bit more robust in the US. Could you make an argument that even though this is natural content, organic content that she's making at home, she didn't plan this, that the child is actually employed by the parent because the content is being used and monetized?
Absolutely. And that's why we talked about Coogan's Law, and that's why we talked about the Child Protection Act in California, that we go out of our way to say, this person's an employee. And we haven't gone this far yet, and I probably know where your next question is going to go, is what protections do we have with said employees? But yeah, their argument would be made from me that if you are monetizing, if you are putting them on a screen, if you are taking money for the content they're creating, they are your employee. And so for those reasons, are we following the same protocols and rules that we would have if they were working for another company? In the United States, we have very specific rules on how often a child can work. What can a child do? Do they have to do those same rules when they're working for their parent? So it's an interesting slippery slope, but this is the new social media generation. The laws they have not created to keep up with the new times. They were written a long time ago. They were written before there was TikTok, Instagram, whatever all that stuff is. So it's very interesting.
On which you are huge on those apps. And it's just crazy to me that you don't know how to use them.
I don't even know how to work.
Don't even get me started. But following on from that school of thought, if the child is being employed by the parent and mum says, oh, hold on, we've just got to do this video just before I put dinner on. And she does that 3 or 4 times that week. And the kid is like, I'm not allowed to eat until we've done the content. Is that a hostile work environment?
Not only is it possible, but what's even more interesting is, Anoushka, if you wanted to file a suit against your employer today and say they have treated me hostile, you have a statute of limitations of 2 years, maybe 3 in some situations. When you're a child, you have 2 years until after the point you hit majority. So let's say this child at 18 years old realizes, back when I was 7, my mom treated me in a hostile work environment. I now have until I'm maybe 20, maybe 21 to bring the lawsuit. Parents have to be careful.
And look, I'm not saying that's what's going on in Molly-Mae's house. Her daughter looks, very, very happy, especially when she's talking about biting her friends in all of the vlogs. But I'm assuming, Claire, that this isn't similar in the UK. I know our friends across the pond are a little bit more litigious. Could you make those same arguments?
I did look into this a few years ago and whether we could use, for example, our misuse of private information tort for a child to bring a claim against their parent. I think there are significant issues with it in the UK. Apart from anything else, practically, do we want to be using those types of laws, setting up parents and children in that sort of litigious battle? It would be very unusual in the UK, I think, to see that. It has implications not just for the court process, but the whole family when you start talking about it being almost a battle of child's rights against the parents' rights. In terms of practicalities as well, there's real difficulties because if you think about a lot of the information that parents like Molly-Mae share, it's not just information about their children, it's information about their lives as parents. So where do you say this is about Molly-Mae's life as a parent? Where is the dividing line to then say, well, that's not Molly-Mae's life, that's her daughter's life that we're talking about? It's so embedded in that family situation, all of that information. To be able to say, well, that's my information, that's your information is quite tricky, I think. You've then got the issue as well that we've got constantly changing norms in terms of sharenting. 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't maybe normal for parents to share everything about their children online, but increasingly it is the norm. And the more the influencer parents are sharing information and images and videos of the children, the more it becomes normalised for ordinary parents as well. So I think by the time that children today become adults, it's really hard to know how the courts would deal with that. Would they say, actually, this is just a normal part of life? You don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy anymore. And that's very much what the test would be in this country. Do we have a reasonable expectation of privacy?
God, that's an interesting position. We could end up in a society where no family has that reasonable expectation of privacy because we've all become micro-influencers in our own home.
It's entirely a possibility. And I think the problem is that until we start talking about that more, until the state starts explaining to people these are the potential risks of you putting information online, once you put that information out there, you have lost control over it. Parents maybe just think, well, I can see it happening everywhere else, so that is normal. Why wouldn't I do it? There don't seem to be any downsides to it. So there's maybe a bigger argument to be, or a debate to be had about, well, what would be the way that we would want it to go? What are the harms? What are the benefits? So that people can take an informed view about it, rather it being a case down the line of there being litigation.
Claire, outside of the conversations about consent and personal prerogative on the behalf of the child, there are some other considerations. Now, AI identity theft?
Yeah, that was something that I was talking about with students in the States actually recently, and they were really concerned that the information that is being put up online about them now is being used in all sorts of ways that certainly they and parents would never have imagined, I imagine. So we obviously have our images that go online. There was some research done last year by Human Rights Watch where they found a huge number of images of children in Australia and Brazil that had been used to train AI. So this was something that parents, when they put information online, were completely oblivious of. There's been a report more recently, I think it was Internet Watch, commenting about the fact that voices on social media are now being cloned. They're potentially being used in ways that, again, that parents wouldn't expect, to pretend that it is someone calling when it really isn't and asking for money. So there are all sorts of ways that at the moment we are only just sort of scraping the surface with and starting to realise that actually that information out there about the way we look, the way we talk, the way we walk, our mannerisms could be used in all sorts of different ways.
That's so interesting. Shaun, when you look at this, what jumps out to you as possible dangers that maybe I wouldn't see straight away?
First of all, y'all both got me freaking out about this AI stuff right now. I'm listening to both of you in my mouth. I'm like, oh. I was like, I don't like any part of this. And but I am, and listen to both of you talk just now, thinking from myself from a personal point in America. And I understand when we're talking about our privacy rights. Now I'm sounding British. I'm saying privacy. Our privacy rights.
That's how we get you.
The way I think. No. Privacy, 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 privacy. Red leather, red leather, red leather. Our privacy rights. Because here the question would be, a consenting adult would know their specific privacy rights. And so the parent themselves would be like, I understand it. To think that we would have to trust a 6, 7, 8-year-old child to also understand the same rights, it's just got my head thinking about what is going to happen down the road. What are going to be the far-reaching ramifications? And I know we are a much more litigious society, America. And so I'm thinking of the potential lawsuits down the road, and I can see a wave of lawsuits from influencers. And let's make it clear, these lawsuits have already been happening. If you look at some of the child actors who used to sue their parents for emancipation because they would say, look, even though we're having to put 15% inside of my Coogan account, you were mismanaging the other 85% that was coming to you. You were mismanaging my likeness. I think we're going to start seeing that a lot more. These children are saying, you are mismanaging my likeness and affecting my value down the road. And that's one of the issues that they have with some of the California law is you are affecting these children and collectively speaking for them, and you're not acting as a parent, you're acting as an agent, and are you really using the child's best interest? So all of these things are fascinating to me because I think there's going to be a wave of lawsuits that some people might start to profit off of. And so there might be a wave of lawsuits in the future that we might start to see.
Would you want to put a 1-800 number behind you, Shaun?
You want to put a little...
Not that that's why he does it, folks.
Not that's why we do it. Yeah.
Now, you bring up that this has been happening already. There is this Cam Barrett case in the US. She's part of the first generation of influencer kids who've grown up, and she's campaigning to have stricter laws on this. She says she was bullied at school for stuff her mum shared, like the date of her first period on Facebook.
Well, don't forget, think about like any person who has ever had a child whose child has said, Mom, you're embarrassing me. Why would you do that? And mom thinks something is funny and shares it with her friends, and the kid looks at it completely differently. And the mom's like, oh my God, I did not know the way that was affecting you. And if you start looking at it that way and you then see a child saying, you don't know what you did to my life. You don't know the way you affected me. You don't know the way that I was bullied. Those do turn into lawsuits. And that's what I'm saying. Potentially down the road, we might start seeing those things that, Mom, you thought it was funny. You had me do this. You made money off of this, but you were destroying me. Here are my therapy notes. Here are my friends. Here are the things. So yeah, I could see those happening. Now, we're joking about it, but children do get affected differently. And sometimes parents forget that. We always think that these children are just mini adults, but what they are, there is a reason we have protection for vulnerable adults. There's a reason we have protections for children because they can't protect themselves. So yeah, I can see a wave of lawsuits coming.
The Traitors is back, with a twist. This series sees this bunch of famous faces take to the castle for the ultimate game of trust and treachery. Join me, Ed Gamble, and the banished and murdered celebrities as they spill all the secrets from the Round Table on the official visualised podcast, The Celebrity Traitors Uncloaked. Watch on BBC iPlayer and listen for more on BBC Sounds.
And look, I don't want to act like I'm being like, you shouldn't do this and you can't show the kids or whatever, because I follow 101 influencers who I remember when they were pregnant. I know who the baby father is. I mean, I'm invested in the life. I like the kids. The kids are funny. Kids are just naturally hilarious people. I don't want it to come across like that. It's just weird. It's this like uncharted territory. Claire, if there's a call to action here, what is it?
To let people know what the risks are. So in France, for example, there's been a lot of information about the fact that they did instigate legislation back in 2020 originally to regulate sharenting, bringing in laws very much like the laws that Shaun's mentioned. But one of the bits that's discussed less in their laws is that they put in provisions which say that the platforms, the video sharing platforms, should be informing the users, the parents, about what the potential impact is of sharing children's videos online. And at the same time, they said those platforms should be informing the children. It's specifically targeted at children who are under 16, but it should be telling them what their risks are, what the risks are, what their rights are as well. And that puts in specifically provision for children to be able to exercise a right to be forgotten, for there to be a right to erase information that's been put up there that they don't like. So we've talked about the fact that down the line a child might say when they're 7 to 14, I don't like the information that was there when I was 0 to 7. One of the responses there might be, well, actually, go and exercise your right to be forgotten. You don't need to ask your parents to do that. You could go off and just ask the platforms to take that information down. It's not a huge, heavy court case. It's not going to involve lots of money, but that could be an approach. And obviously, if you've got that information behind it, so children know they have this right, if it's embedded in digital literacy classes, so children understand actually, these are the rights I have when people use my information. They're all ideas that we could maybe take forward.
That is absolutely brilliant. Ooh, do I sound British when I said that? Brilliant?
Yes, you
Is that,
do.
am I learning?
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Isn't that a phrase? Mm-hmm. I am so British. Give me my marmalade. Give me my Paddington Bear. I am so British right now.
You see, this is how we do it. And then you'll be begging us to come back and take over. You'll be asking, first man in the South saying, bring
Claire,
back the British.
Such a brilliant point, Claire. And that makes so much sense. And it's so simple, which means it'll never happen.
Brilliant. Now you sound like an American. Guys, thank you both so much for this. I mean, this is just such a fascinating walkthrough. I mean, I hope we get some sort of clearer path, because this isn't going anywhere. And I will be putting my kids online and I will be profiting off them. So, I would like some laws around that to make sure I don't get sued. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Well,
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Cheers. Claire, it's so wonderful to meet you.
You too, Shaun.
Claire, in case you're wondering, I am no Idris.
Oh. One of our listeners went out of their way, which I really respect. Oh, you've printed it off. Oh, bloody hell, Shaun. Jesus Christ,
so
go
mad.
digital. That's it. One of our listeners took their free time, took it into their own hands to email his practice. So they went and found out what the email address was, because we don't put it on the podcast. Shaun, just read it out.
Dear Mr. Kent, I wanted to send a message to you to say how much I have enjoyed following you on the BBC. You have been an absolute joy since your coverage of the Diddy trial. I truly believe you are one of the most handsome Americans I've ever laid my eyes upon. That being said, you are no Idris. A loving expat, Cindy.
Well, that's not opinion. That's a fact. Hashtag BBC verified.
I don't even know what an expat is. And I'm just like, you know what?
That's not what you expected when you signed up to do this, was it?
I was like, wait.
Can we put a right of reply into Idris Elba and ask him if he thinks he's more sexy than Shaun?
No, because I'm Team Idris too. I never brought it up.
Let's ask your missus. Let's see what she thinks.
Oh, she'd pick Idris.
Well, there you are. There you go. He's got that certain something. Claire, have that. There you go. That's what it's like on this podcast. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. That was Associate Law Professor Claire Bessant and our resident trial attorney Shaun Kent joining us from South Carolina. And that's it for this episode of Fame Under Fire. Send me questions and story suggestions on social media. It's Anoushka_MD on Instagram and on TikTok. Make sure you subscribe to the BBC Sounds YouTube channel so you never miss an episode.